Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast, UFC Betting Preview. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down a 14-fight card for UFC London. Give you our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. If you'd like to tell some of the bets that we discuss on today's show, make sure to find the quick slip links both in the podcast and video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/betnow. 14-fight card as of now. I feel like I say that every week because we keep losing one, but we are recording this prior to weigh-ins. 14-fight card. Prelim scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern, main card at 5 p.m. Eastern because we're in the O2 Arena in London, England. So make sure you get those bets in on Saturday night because these fights will be starting right about the time that the NCAA tournament games start on Saturday. You will get distracted. You will forget to get the bets in, so make sure you get them in on Friday night. Our main event, a featherweight potential title eliminator between Movsar Evloev minus 250 and Lerone Murphy at plus 205. Evloev, the number one featherweight contender. Murphy, the number 3 contender. But combined, these guys are 17-0 and 1 in the promotion, both unbeaten in their professional careers. Both have 9 UFC wins. Murphy had a draw in his UFC debut. Very good fight here. Both extremely well-rounded. Murphy is the slightly better striker by the numbers, particularly out landing opponents by 2.4 strikes per minute. Evloev 1.4 his differential. Evloev does the better control rate, and he is the more proactive grappler. Spent 81% of his grappling time in control positions, just 57% for Lerone Murphy. Evloev also averages 6.2 takedown attempts per 5 minutes of distance, and he's completed 61% of those attempts, which is a very high rate. He has been off, though, for 15 months, hasn't competed since late 2024. Murphy has fought 6 times in the past 3 years. Evloev fought just 3 times, and also Evloev pulled out of a fight with Aaron Pico. They rescheduled it. He ended up pulling out. Murphy ended up taking the fight and ended up knocking Pico out. So Evloev may be dealing with some injuries outside of the octagon. He's pulled out of a number of fights in the past few years. Scheduled fight with Bryce Mitchell ended up falling through. This fight does, in my opinion, come down to whether or not he's able to get that top time. And particularly early, I did put in my breakdown that you might be able to come into this fight and potentially bet Murphy, if he's able to deny the first couple of takedown attempts, show that he's able to deny the grappling, keep this fight standing, you may still be able to get plus money on him live during round 1, or I'd imagine you would be able to get plus money, but you could probably still get a pretty good price live during round 1 if he shows that he's able to shuck off the takedown attempts, or if he does get taken down, that he's able to scramble back to his feet against Evloev. Worth noting, the takedown prop for Evloev, and this fight is juiced to go to a decision. It's about minus 250. Evloev's takedown prop is 5.5 juiced to the over. At a sharper book, it is actually 6.5 juiced to the over. So across a 25-minute fight, books expecting that he will get at least 1 takedown per round, probably even more than that. It's just a matter of how much top time and how much damage he's able to do from those positions, how many submission attempts he's potentially able to put on Lerone Murphy. I actually think the opponents he's fought, Evloev, he's gotten a decision in all of his wins. I think he's actually gotten a little bit unlucky in terms of not finishing fights, particularly the Dan Ige fight. He put a ton of damage on Ige, ended up getting a 10-8 third round. I think other opponents would have folded to that damage. He's a pretty dynamic striker in his own right. Knees, elbows. I mean, he'll mix it up just like Lerone does. I think Lerone is just the faster man and the more efficient guy on the feet. If Evloev is able to get the grappling going, I think he will be the side. But the last thing to point out is close and competitive rounds, the judges may give deference to the hometown fighter, the Englishman in London. And Evloev is going to have to win his rounds definitively if he's going to cover his price tag at minus 250. Now, I do project slight value on him as a favorite, but I probably prefer, and I project value on him as a favorite, I project value on the fight to go to decision. As a result, I show correlated value on Evloev to win by decision. I make that line about minus 140. It is minus 140 at several books. There are some books, though, offering you minus 115. So I think, the fact that I project it there, the fact that some books are offering you exactly that number and other books are saying, hey, we'll give you minus 115 instead, I would probably go ahead and take those minus 115s. I think this one is going to go to decision. They're both shown they're incredibly durable throughout their careers. I think maybe cardio in the late stages for Evloev could potentially be what gets him finished, because we haven't seen him extend out to 5 rounds. We have seen Murphy extend out twice to 5 rounds. But all that is to say, I think Evloev by decision a better bet than his money line, and I think Murphy by KO may be a better bet than his money line, but I would not argue against taking the underdog odds. So Evloev by decision at -115, the way I'm probably betting this fight, but I think you can, as I said, look for a live price on Murphy depending on how the early grappling goes. Billy, you're going to take an underdog shot here. I'm curious where you like the price down to. Both of these guys, as I said, have gone to decision a number of times. I think it's 15 combined decisions across their 20 combined UFC bouts. So where do you have Murphy in terms of, where do you project him out in your mind in terms of a price? Where do you like him down to? And then any other bets you see for this fight, live angles or props, and how do you give the winning method for Murphy? Do you think it's coming by decision?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the live stuff on Murphy. In my luck ratings this week, I said I'm taking about half a unit on Murphy and saving the other bit for a live angle. And that's for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, you pointed out he's got the better 5-round experience. He's also more efficient, which I believe you said, especially on the feet. And, Evloev is the exact kind of guy that unless you have Merab cardio, you kind of don't trust an extended period because he has to work so hard for what he gets, where Murphy can be a little bit calmer, wait at range, snipe with some shots, use his size and strength edge to kind of control the action without overextending himself, where Evloev's going to be hitting crazy scrambles and diving for legs, which is all really hard to do. And that's just a harder thing to keep up over 5 rounds. If he wins the first 3 of them, it might not matter. It also wouldn't shock me if I saw like a late Murphy knockout, as you alluded to. In a weird way, this is Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards, with Murphy playing the role of Leon Edwards stylistically. I've thought Murphy reminds me a lot of Leon Edwards at his best in general. Tall, long guys for the division, good defensive grappling, good fenced grappling. Not great takedown defense, especially Murphy, but he doesn't get held down. Pico took him down twice, only got a couple minutes of control time. I think Josh Emmett landed 4 takedowns in that 5-round fight and 3:39 of control time. So the over props on takedowns for Evloev makes a lot of sense because of that, if Murphy's good at getting up. But it also means how's Movsar going to win the rounds, especially in London, when Murphy just needs to land 1 or 2 big punches to, at least in the judges' minds, counteract those takedowns that are going to be not, I don't think, come with a ton of damage. He also doesn't attempt a lot of takedowns. In his whole UFC career, Movsar has 2 officially credited submission attempts. Both came against Hakeem Dawood in some random fight. He's not attempted a single submission outside of that. So not going to win any rounds that way either. It's been interesting on the price. I got plus 215 Sunday night on Murphy. Looked like I immediately got some CLV and then it bounced right back to where it was. I think I'd be comfortable with Murphy down to like plus 180, plus 190, somewhere in that range. Beyond that, the 4-5 decision prop or paired with the over 2.5, something like that, I think is the better bet, as well as the live stuff you said. I could see a decision or a late knockout for him. I don't expect Murphy to just kill him out of the gate, but we didn't expect him to do that Aaron Pico, and he did. So I'm trying not to get too heavy into the method of victory when I'm getting a good price on Murphy, just straight up.
Couple more things I want your thoughts on before we move off of this fight. The first is the props. Among the 4 props, Evloev over 5.5 takedowns, -130. I believe Murphy over a half a takedown. I saw between plus 120 and plus 160. Murphy, I think the over-under was about 76.5 strikes, and Evloev's over-under for strikes was around 55.5. You don't have to bet any of those. I'm not saying there's necessarily value in any of those, but if you had to pick one of those, which one are you going with?
Probably the over for strikes on Evloev, because, I mean, their actual strikes landed is pretty similar if you look at them statistically. That's a huge, comes with a grain of salt because Evloev gets a lot of those on the ground. I would want to, if in some places offer this and some don't, go for total strikes on Evloev rather than significant strikes, because a lot of those are going to be on the ground where the official scorekeeper has some leeway on how to score those. Usually those numbers are extremely close. Like most fights, they only call like 5 or 6 shots is insignificant, for lack of a better term. But if you can find books that offers that and they charge you a 5 to 10 strike premium, I would go with that. Just, I don't know if it's like the NBA where the hometown team, so to speak, has the scorekeepers who could deem strikes as significant or not. Probably not, but anything like that would have me concerned that he'd get some pitter-pat shots on the ground that don't get scored the way we need them to.
Yeah, I think it's an independent third party that ended up scoring them. I don't think it's a UFC employee. I don't think it is a local official. I think it is like Fight Metric or an independent contractor that ends up providing the official stats and data for UFC. So there should be some consistency from one region to the next. It's not like the judges have access to the stats or anything. So skewing the data, fluffing up the hometown fighters' stats doesn't necessarily end up paying off. It's not like when you're watching a hockey game and the home scorekeeper is giving the goalie a few extra shots on goal to make his save percentage a little bit better. So yeah, the judges don't actually see the stats. There's no incentive necessarily to change significant strikes to just regular strikes or what have you. I do want to get your thoughts as well, Lily. This fight is minus 250 to go to a decision, but it is the main event. So from a DFS perspective on a 14-fight card, though you do like the underdog, and I'm going to imagine you will have Lerone Murphy in some places, what are you doing with Evloev, and what are you doing with this fight in general when you have a main event that is likely to end in a decision and not necessarily be a 100 plus significant strike on either side decision? Is it a fight that you generally try to go against from a DFS perspective because you have so many other options? You have 26 other fighters you can choose from up and down the card. So what's your general strategy when you have a main event like this on a big card, but the main event is heavily lined to go to a decision?
Yeah. This one's tricky because I'm on the underdog, and there's a lot of ways for Murphy to win this without scoring a lot of points, which means I will have more lineups without either main event fighter than I normally would. Evloev has a massive ceiling, though, right? Like, there's a case here where he gets double-digit takedowns because Murphy keeps getting up. So I will definitely have some Evloev in GPPs. In cash games, I'm definitely stacking this one. I mean, if I think the underdog's going to win, he's super cheap. And the underdog could win while the favorite still lands 8 takedowns or whatever. Like, there could just be a ton of total points in a way that it's not skewed to one fighter enough to win a GPP, but it keeps you in cash contention. So probably how I'll approach it. Again, with 14 fights, as you pointed out, I don't think this is as high of a priority as the main event usually is. Historically, at least based on the data I kept, like 85, 88% of the time, at least one of the two 5-round fighters makes the optimal lineup, though. So, like, my general starting point is every lineup is going to have one or the other of these guys, and there needs to be a reason to shake me off that, which this one kind of does provide.
Let's go on to our fight of the night, the co-main event between Luke Riley, the Englishman, and Michael Aswell, an American. Riley about minus 235, Aswell plus 195. This is a fight in the featherweight division. Neither guy has a ton of UFC experience, just one fight, a win over Bogdangrad for Riley. Aswell, I believe, 1-2 in the UFC, but is coming off of a win. Riley, the former Cage Warriors champion, is a training partner of Paddy Pimblett. Lost round 1 in that fight against Grab, but ended up coming out and getting the knockout in round 2. Does seem like he's grappleable. I don't necessarily think Aswell is going to do that, though. He seems like more of a boxer himself, and I think we could get a competitive striking fight here, but as a result of seeing both guys potentially swinging, I do show value on the fight to end inside the distance. I make that line about minus 125 to end inside the distance, and you can get even money. So would take that up to about minus 110. I also make Riley to win inside the distance about plus 165, and I think you can get as high as plus 220 on that prop as well, which you are giving out. Billy, you're going to go with Riley inside the distance, and then also his round 2 and round 3 props, I believe, as well, which means you probably like him as a live bet after round 1 on top of those tickets. So we're in agreement here. I like the fight to end inside the distance. I show value on Riley to win inside the distance. I'll probably just end up having some of the under or ends ITD, though. So what did you see in this fight? How'd you land on Riley? And give me your full betting approach for it.
Yeah, before I jump all the way into it, do you remember the circumstances of Michael Aswell's one UFC win, Sean? There was a unique scenario. It was the fight against Lucas Almeida, where like 3 days before the fight, there was a ton of pictures of Almeida's hand being clearly broken.
Oh, yes.
That was Aswell's one. I didn't remember either until I was researching for my full preview. And Aswell did an interview where he's like, yeah, I saw it. Everybody saw it. I knew he wasn't throwing the right hand. And even during the finish, Aswell has him down and he's ground and pounding him. And Almeida is like not using his right hand to defend himself while it's happening, which is to say he could very well be winless in the UFC against a less compromised Lucas Almeida. With that said, in the Contender Series, he lost a close split decision to Bogdangrad, who Luke Riley just beat. So as well as just a really tough guy to line, his other loss in the UFC proper was on short notice and up a weight class to Balaji Oki. So he has 3 fights, and like none of them he was definitively better or worse than his opponent, which makes it tricky. But breaking down the styles of both guys, kind of a pure boxer, has not attempted a single takedown in any 3 of those fights. Luke Riley, just a much more well-rounded striker. He's, trains out of Liverpool. He almost has the city kickboxing style where he does a lot of feinting and then tries to counter when he draws his opponent out, as well as a guy you can draw out because he really wants to just stand there and swing heavy punches back and forth. And I think Riley's going to piece him up if he can suck him into that kind of fight. Riley also has really good leg kicks. He didn't get to show it in the UFC too much because his opponent kept trying to take him down. I really liked that he had the discipline to keep his feet on the ground when facing a grappler, but then open up with those against better matchups in Cage Warriors, which is why I'm on like the round 2, round 3 props. I think he's going to just kind of break Aswell down over time. I don't think he's going to starch him with one shot, but he's got really good volume. Riley has really good volume, really good output. He can maintain that pace for a long time. I'm hoping it gets all the way to round 3 because I'm betting the same on both of those and it's a better prop. I think a round 2 finish is probably the likeliest single outcome here, just as the leg kicks pile up, as the counter punches pile up, as Aswell gets frustrated and swinging bigger and bigger. I think that's when Riley's going to do the most damage, but I'm doing half a unit on Riley inside the distance in general, and then 0.1 on his round 2 and round 3 props. That way, if he gets a finish at all, I'm coming out well ahead, but if it's 2 or 3, much bigger. And if you get a better price on him live, by all means, I just don't think you will against a guy like Aswell. This fight was not a let's see who's the better fighter here. It's, hey, everybody, look how good and fun Luke Riley is why the UFC made this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Sticking him in the co-main event with limited UFC experience, trying to get a highlight for him right away. Actually surprised Christian Leroy Duncan is not in the co-main event here, even though I think his opponent ended up getting replaced. But before we get there, we're going to turn to our favorite underdogs on this card. This one in particular would be among my best bets, but it is my favorite underdog too. And I have another bet that I like later that I'm going to save for the best bet section. Billy and I are aligned on another underdog that we'll get to in a moment as well. But Michael Venom Page minus 192 against Sam Patterson, sitting closer to plus 160. Fight around plus 130 to go to a decision. Patterson, 9 years younger and clearly the better grappler. But what I like most about this matchup is he's essentially the same size as MVP. MVP typically smoother, quicker, better footwork than a lot of the guys at welterweight, but also taller, longer, lankier. He doesn't have those advantages over Sam Patterson, and I think Patterson is able to get this fight to the ground with his long limbs, with his elite grappling. He's going to pose a real problem for MVP, who we have seen grappled in the past. I don't think his takedown defense, I don't think his overall defensive grappling has made massive strides in his late 30s. I think he's just shown that he is better at it than people thought he was, but I do think Patterson is the type of fighter who's going to put it to the test, and getting the guy with full grappling upside at plus money, who I think can end the fight via submission, certainly a position that I want to back here. I make Patterson about plus 125. I take his money line down to about plus 135. And then I also kind of align with his submission prop as well. I make it about plus 450. That's roughly where the market is. Probably a bet I'll consider poking as well. But Patterson on the money line, one of my favorite bets this week, and certainly my favorite underdog on this card. Billy, MVP against Sam Patterson. We've been on MVP a bunch in his UFC fights. He's won us some money in his UFC fights. Do you agree or disagree that it's the time to potentially fade him with a grappler here?
I do. I'm probably not going to do it myself. I actually really like the over 2.5 at plus money here. These guys are, like, from my understanding, pretty close friends who trained together extensively for a while. And MVP, if you look at his UFC record, I think they've all been decisions, right? Yeah, 4 straight decisions anyway. And that's against guys he was trying to hurt. And he might not be trying to hurt Sam Patterson here, or vice versa. So given all that, I think MVP probably loses a kind of boring decision. It could be the last fight on his deal. It's his 5th UFC fight. No idea how long they signed him for. He loses a boring decision and doesn't get hurt in the process. Just enough time to get on the MVP card against somebody. MVP on MVP. This needs to happen. For those who don't know, the MVP card is the Gina Carano, Ronda Rousey card. You got to get MVP on MVP. I think he loses a boring decision, gets himself cut, and we see him on Netflix in 2 months. That's my hot take for the event.
Who do you pair him up with? Who's the opponent you're eyeing for him?
some random kid from California. It doesn't matter. We just need MVP on MVP. Like, it's not about who he fights. It's about that he fights. I mean, who do they get for Francis Ngannou? Felipe Lins? Come on.
Could Uriah Faber move up to welterweight and take him on?
Sure. Yeah. Whoever you got. They got some like 3-2 pro hanging around who lives within driving distance of the arena. That would be who I pair him up with. Whoever we got.
Who's the other guy from Southern California that I'm blanking on? He wanted to fight. He's same. It's like a featherweight, same division as Faber. Oh man, I can't believe I'm blanking on this right now. I will find it. Oh, Cub Swanson.
Yeah. He's fighting Jeremy Stevens coming up in the UFC.
Probably a little small for MVP. But,
MVP. You know, yeah, probably a little bit.
If we're gonna put it in California, maybe Cub gets to enter also with a weapon of some sort aside from just his hands, and that'll make that fight a little bit more fair. We're gonna move on to the consensus underdog that Billy and I like on this card in the worst division in the sport. Every one of these fights has been an absolutely miserable watch in the UFC heavyweight division, and we're taking one of those dogs in a potentially sloppy fight. That's Louis Sutherland at about plus 210 against Brando Pericic at minus 265. Line has moved in a little bit on Sutherland, but I make him closer to plus 185. I would bet him down at about 2-1 or better. I also like the over 1.5 in this fight, or the goes to decision as well. I think we could see a bunch of clinching up against the fence here. And at minimum, I like Sutherland to extend things, get out of round one, and then potentially win a sloppy decision against the bigger man. Pericic, 2 inches taller, a 3-inch reach advantage. But Sutherland is absolutely jacked. I'm hoping he could get some cage push and win a gross decision against Brando Pericic. So my bets here, Sutherland at 2-1 or better, and the over 1.5, I believe, is plus money as well. The goes to decision is also near 4-1, but I don't know if it'll end up going all 15 minutes. Could be worth a look as well, though. Billy, aside from the bet on Sutherland, and I want your analysis of that, I would also like your take on the over-under and the plus money you can get both on the over 1.5 and the goes to decision.
Yeah, I mean, heavyweight overs are always great. Like we saw Vitor Petrino and Stephen Asplund last week. Actually, it wasn't a good fight. It was a fun fight for like the wrong reasons. And those guys just beat the crap out of each other and still nobody got stopped. So heavyweight overs and flyweight unders, because we live in the upside down world, are both like almost always good / fun bets to make lately, it feels like. I actually really like Louis Sutherland. I was on him last time, and I'm going to talk about that fight in just a second. He's a big, athletic, former rugby player, I believe, who can move pretty well, and at heavyweight, like, that's enough. And I have a new rule for when I'm, like, handicapping fights. It only applies to heavyweights for a second here, which is if you got heel hooked by Walter Walker, no, you didn't. It didn't count. It doesn't matter. Like, it's happening to everyone. I can't explain it. It should be incredibly easy to predict and thus defend, but nobody can. So there's clearly like some voodoo or black magic, like Yuri accused Pereira of. I think Walter Walker got his hands on the Amazonian magic as well. So if you strike that heel hook loss to Walter Walker from Louis Sutherland's record, I don't think he's nearly as big of a underdog as he is in this one, because Brando Pericic beat a really out of shape guy who came in on short notice in his fight. Or it wasn't short notice, like they moved it from the Contender Series to a UFC proper fight for no reason, which nobody really understood. Regardless, he got a 2-minute win, and I still wasn't especially impressed. And I just think Louis is a better athlete when he's not getting heel hooked by Walter Walker, which again no longer counts. Those are stricken from the handicapping record because it just doesn't make sense anymore.
What is March known for? College hoops, obviously. Spring training baseball, that too. But it's also known as the time when we have one of the absolute best deals on Action Pro the entire year. Head over to actionnetwork.com/pro to get 6 months off Pro for $49.99. Get it now for access to all of our picks as soon as we get them and log them in the app. No more waiting 30 minutes and getting stale lines. We'll also have NCAA player props powered by our analytics team that smash it every tournament. That's actionnetwork.com/pro to get yourself signed up for $49.99 for 6 months today. The Action Network podcast has teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook, where new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets instantly. Love the thrill of live betting. DraftKings has got you covered. Bet live on star player props and in-progress games right as they happen. To get started, use promo code Action Network when signing up with DraftKings. Again, use code Action Network when signing up and bet $5 to get $200 back in bonus bets instantly. The crown is yours. We're going to move on to our top props section, a number of fights we're going to touch on here. First being, you know what? We're going to save this fight because you have it in your best bets section. So I'm going to start off with your fights and your props, Billy, because I didn't really have many thoughts on these. The first of which is Iwo Baranowski against Austin Lane. Baranowski minus 630, Lane plus 450 is the light heavyweight fight. Not sure how Austin Lane is getting down to light heavyweight. He's 38 years old. He's cutting to 205, I believe, for the first time in his career. He's been knocked out 7 times. But if he's able to make it, he's the much bigger man, 6 inches taller, a 7-inch reach advantage. I do imagine, though, cutting all of that weight is going to suck him out, and Baranowski is probably going to knock him out relatively quickly. I would probably just blindly take the under 1.5 here. It is difficult, though, to find value on this fight, and it's if I had to bet that one fight is going to end up getting canceled, it is probably this one. So, Billy, your bets that you're going to give out here, very likely, I would say, or at least partially likely, do not end up being graded. But you like Baranowski to land a takedown in this matchup at plus 200. So give me your thoughts.
Yeah, this one is just a pure, I think the market / sports books don't realize Baranowski has a grappling background. He was like Polish ADCC. I want to say Polish champ, but maybe just like Polish and level competitor. I don't know. But he got in 2 wars. On the Contender Series, he fought Muhammad Ali, who's like Muhammad Ali, no relation, as I said last time, who's a elite level jiu-jitsu player. So he obviously wasn't going to take him down. He knocked him out in 20 seconds. And then his UFC debut proper was against Evloev, and they both just started swinging and dropping each other right away. I think if he's allowed to fight for more than 90 seconds, he might shoot for a takedown because that's his background. And Austin Lane goes for takedowns himself, but he can't actually grapple. He's just a better athlete than 80% of heavyweights. But now he's no longer a heavyweight, and will he have that strength or will he have that speed advantage that he did against big, fat, sloppy dudes? Probably not. He also got taken down and submitted by Vitor Petrino in his last fight. So it's a pretty clear path to victory for Baranowski, who probably shouldn't just keep getting in extreme rock'em sock'em robot wars over and over for like both his career longevity and his like actual longevity and personal well-being. So you got a straightforward path to taking down Austin Lane just by being the better technician. I think he takes it. And at plus 200, if he does use a grappling heavy game plan here, we'll never get those lines again because the word will be out that he actually is more of a grappler than a brawler.
Chanel Dyer's minus 500 against Ravina Oliveira is a women's strawweight bout. I do show value on this fight to go to a decision at minus 330, and you can bet it at minus 230. And you also like Dyer to land the over on her significant strike prop. I don't know if we have a line for that yet, but considering I do like the fight to go all 15 minutes, I think it speaks to the fact that she should clear that number at a fight where she's a minus 500 favorite. Oliveira, curious, Billy. I mean, it's a 115-pound fight. You just think she could take the damage well enough that she's able to survive and allow Dyer to rack up the significant strikes?
Yeah, not lines up at DraftKings yet. Some other places, I'm seeing that line about 70 for Dyer. Believe she can clear that. She landed 115 on the Contender Series in an absolute war against Carol Foto that Chanel Dyer was knocked down 3 times in that fight and still had time to land over 100 significant strikes. Highly regarded Muay Thai background. She was fighting a karate-style fighter in the Contender Series, and that, in theory, makes it much harder to land a high volume of strikes because of the range and the distance management. Ravina Oliveira is not that, not a great defensive striker, and I just don't think Dyer has the power to put her away, at least not with any of the first 70 or so significant strikes she lands. Dyer also a much better athlete, so again, with what you said, expecting this fight to go to the distance, expecting her to land 5 or 6 probably significant strikes per minute puts her on pace to get that in 11 or 12 minutes. Could easily land more than that if there's no grappling that she has to defend, which there might be early, but as Oliveira tires, there probably won't be. So if that line is around 70 or lower, obviously I'm going to take the over on that, but I'm waiting for DraftKings to post their line.
Christian Leroy Duncan is about minus 500 against Roman Dolidze. Middleweight bout here. We both like this fight to end inside the distance. I specifically, though, am taking CLD inside the distance. I make that prop around even money. You can bet it at plus 110. I also lean towards his knockout prop as well, but would rather have the inside the distance given the limited price discrepancy. You're taking the fight to end inside the distance, Billy, which I believe is closer to minus 130. I'm a little bit more in alignment with that market. I do think CLD is a little bit more durable, I suppose, or at least my model does, than Dolid. So more value for me, just purely slightly more value or bigger edge on Duncan to win inside the distance, but completely get the argument for betting the fight to end inside the distance, considering the price discrepancy isn't huge. Billy, how do you see this happening? I would assume it's by knockout. Do you think it's going to be early or more attritional? And then you're playing the inside the distance, I would imagine, because you think Delides has some submission upside as well. He's gotten them and, has proven that he can get fighters to weird positions and end up finishing fights.
It's hilarious that he doesn't have a submission in the UFC because he had that crazy, I believe it was on Phil Hawes when he wrapped him up in it almost looked like the John Cena finisher, the STF.
I think it was for Manson who he put in the weird position. Yeah.
Maybe that was it.
It was like a technical positional finish that essentially was a submission.
But they graded it as a TKO. Regardless, actually, now that I'm looking at the lines, I'll probably go under 2.5, which is plus 100. So you're trading effectively the last 2.5 minutes of the fight for all of Delide's finishing chances, which admittedly aren't great after he just got his soul taken by Anthony Hernandez in the last fight, but he's had some time off, and stylistically, at least, this is a better matchup in that this is a very binary matchup where Delide is the far better grappler and Duncan is the far better athlete and striker. And just anytime we see those, you think if it goes to the ground, one guy should be able to finish. If it doesn't, the other guy should. So it was really just the price. I didn't even watch any tape on this fight. I just saw your bet in there, and then I was filling out my spreadsheet and said, well, that's pretty damn close to just the fight ends inside the distance. So to me, it makes more sense to trade 10 cents and the last 2.5 minutes of the fight for whatever, probability you assign of Delide getting the finish.
Yeah, very reasonable approach there. I want to talk about the Curtis Campbell against Danny Silva fight. I think I would be on opposite sides of the Campbell money line, which I believe you do lean to or taking, but you like the goes to decision here at about, I have this fight that goes to decision here at about minus 145. We'll get to your side on this matchup a little bit later. But the Jones Sola fight, the Mason Jones Axel Sola fight as well. I make that fight about minus 177 to go to decision. You can get that at minus 150. In the Silva Campbell fight, I make about minus 220, and you can get it closer to minus 160. So that goes to decision on both of those bouts. But I do want to transition to Billy's best bets, or his final bets here, which are both on Mason Jones at minus 125 and Curtis Campbell at minus 230. So we'll start with the Jones and Sola fight, Billy, and then we'll move on to Campbell and Silva. Mason Jones, the Welshman, is technically the hometown fighter, I suppose. Sola, though, 11-0, coming in with a draw, looks super jacked up himself, but don't necessarily know if those muscles are more than aesthetic, because I think Jones is the better grappler here, and I think this fight is going to be very competitive, but I'm expecting Jones to have the better gas tank and ultimately pull it out. He's one of your best bets this week. Where do you like his money line to, and how do you feel about the goes to decision bet alongside it?
Yeah, I made this really hard for Sean structurally for anyone listening to the uncomfortability of that.
Doing my best here.
Because my two best bets are on fights that he had props on, which makes it really hard for him to transition naturally there. Campbell is more of a final bet. I'm more passionate about the Jones one. I was just watching some tape, and I actually just kind of on a whim did a full fight preview of this one. It's a very interesting fight where Jones is just he's pretty slow. He just kind of plods forward, throwing heavy strikes. But once he grabs you, you're in trouble. He's a high-level judo competitor and has really, really good top game, both in terms of his damage that he does from there and his jiu-jitsu style, guard passing, positional advancement, holding a guy down. Sola kind of fights moving backwards and is trying to step in place and set up big shots. The reason why I'm on Jones and what also lends itself to your prop is I don't know that the man is capable of being knocked out. He has taken some hellacious shots across his fights, and every time you see him, his face is a little bit different because it was rearranged in the last fight, but he just keeps getting up and plodding forward. He's just the Terminator. And given the style that Sola fights at, where he's trying to keep his range and dance around and stuff. I think Jones is just eventually going to grab him and get him to the fence and bring him down. And it's going to look more definitive to the judges if he's able to hold that position the whole time. I got him at, I want to say, minus 120. It's moved around, kind of jumped up and down a little bit. I think anything inside of minus 140, I'd be on Jones. And at that point, if it crossed over, I would switch to your bet of fight goes to the distance. I think that probably favors Jones a little bit. If you told me ahead of time, this one definitely goes to a decision, partially because it's in the UK and not France. And we're going to be a very partisan crowd with a Welsh dude fighting a French guy. Also fun, this is kind of like the cross-promotional championship because Jones was Cage Warriors lightweight and welterweight champion, and Sola was Aries, which is the French promotions champion. So we're putting the promotional standards up against each other in this fight as well as just the two athletes.
Jones live after round one, a target for you as well?
Not blindly. I'd have to see how it's going. Like if he got hit a little bit, but then finished the round by getting to a closer position or getting some grappling going, then yes. I don't think it's like a cardio issue so much as just who did what, how the fight's playing out.
Just to reiterate, I like the goes to decision on that bout. Not huge. It's listed about minus 160. I make it closer to minus 180. And Curtis Campbell at minus 230 against Danny Silva. Campbell, the Pink Panther, UFC gave him some custom shorts for his UFC debut. Looks like a very talented striker. Muay Thai base. Silva, we saw go 3 competitive rounds, though, with Kevin Evloev, who just knocked out Josh Emmett in his main event debut last week. So it does seem like the line could be getting a little bit wide here on Silva at north of 2-1. I do make it about minus 220. So I'm roughly in line with the market. I'm probably going to end up passing, but I do make the goes to decision north of 2-1, and you can get minus 160. So that'd be my bet on this fight. Billy, you said this is more of a final bet on Campbell for you as opposed to a best bet. So where do you like his money line to, and what did you see in this breakdown?
Yeah, I don't even know that I would actually bet it with what it's at now, which is my apologies. I put this in a little bit ago. Bet Campbell earlier in the week at minus 210 on Sunday night. I was looking at some of these and got it. It was really just a system/luck play for me, where Danny Silva is 2-1 in the UFC with 2 split decisions, one of which he missed weight for, which is not, a great way to build that record. Losing to Kevin Vallejos, I don't know. I can't say it how I heard it pronounced. I was saying Vallejos until last weekend. Anyway, that loss was a good loss, such that those things exist, but his wins were bad wins, such that bad wins exist. And I was actually really impressed by the Pink Panther in his last fight. I talked up his grappling in the Contender Series breakdown of him, and then he came out and his striking looked really good too. Another Liverpool guy, does not train at the same gym as Pimblett and Shamrock and Riley, but also in Liverpool, and honestly reminds me of Pimblett a little bit more than any of those other guys, in that he's kind of grappling first, but he'll also stand there and throw really heavy shots, and just Scousers don't get knocked out his way to winning some striking exchanges.
Yeah, I think it's Vallejos. This is the same week that we also had what we thought was Travis Etienne say that he prefers, or that it's meant to be pronounced Ashan. So I'm just waiting for...
Yeah, we're not doing that, Travis. Sorry, it's been too long.
Devon A-Chain to say that his name is pronounced Etienne, and then they could just end up switching the spelling for their names. We do our best to pronounce the fighters' names correctly on this podcast because we do respect them. It's just very difficult to get the correct pronunciation from places. Sometimes you also watch videos sometimes and the announcers are not pronouncing it correctly as well. Yeah. So when the fighters are brought into the UFC, they do have them say on camera for the announcers how they want their name pronounced. So that is how the announcers know to get it correctly. And then sometimes we don't know what the correct pronunciation is until we actually hear it come out of John Anik or Brendan Fitzgerald's mouth. So I believe it is Vallejos. I think that's what they were saying last week. We'll do our best to pronounce it that way going forward. But for some of these other ones, it can be a little bit difficult at times, such as Iwo. I think it's Baranowski, but I'm not 100% sure what the correct Polish pronunciation is there. I'm going to move on to my best and final bets here. I'd say one is a best bet, one is a final bet. The best bet is Luana Carolina, about minus 130 against Melissa Mullins at plus 112. This fight heavily juiced to go to a decision, but Carolina is the much better striker, and I think she has enough takedown defense to keep this one on the feet and outpoint Mullins, if not eventually put her away. Mullins, when she's not able to get the takedowns, when she's not able to get top position, she's going to look excuse me, she's going to look outclassed on the feet. So pretty binary fight. Could end up finishing, I suppose, considering Carolina clearly the better striker, Mullins clearly the better grappler, but Mullins is a heavily selected underdog this week, the way I build out my projections. I've explained over and over again, so I'm not going to go through it, but Mullins is getting the majority of picks across the public data samples this week. She is a very popular underdog, and as a result, my model makes Carolina closer to minus 200, and you can get her at around minus 130. So she's the best bet for me this weekend. First fight on the card yet again. I don't love making the first fight on the card the best bet. It was not the most fun sweating Pierre Rodriguez to start my night last week. Billy, nice catch, though, by both of us on Rodriguez last week. How do you feel about Luana Carolina at minus 130 kicking off this card?
Yeah, my hope is that we just get some British public action to push that line a little bit better. Because it's one of those where systemically, if it's a women's fight that we expect to go to a decision, I don't love laying juice on it. I know I just did with Pierre Rodriguez. I thought she had a better shot at finishing that than she did. But yeah, I think you're on the right side. Melissa Mullins is not especially good, really, at anything, even the grappling. Like, if you look at the women she was able to take down, I think it says more about them than it does against Mullins. Landed one on Nora Cornell before getting kind of badly knocked out with knees to the body. So don't have much interest in that one, but I think you're on the right side. I will say, on the topic of best bets, to the listening audience, we had 2 joint best bets, and we effectively flipped a coin for who was going to write up each one. I happened to land right and get Pierre Rodriguez while Sean had Bruno Silva, but that was not because, I picked the better fight. It could have gone either way, just so anyone is attributing credit and or blame there appropriately across the two of us.
Bruno Silva also closed as a huge live favorite in that fight and was on the wrong end of somehow a 30-27 scorecard.
We were also robbed, we should say. Yeah.
A lot of people thought he won that fight. I'm not going to sit here and debate it. You will end up probably in the long run end up evening out on split decisions, even though you will only remember the ones that you lose. So it certainly feels like you're on the wrong end more than you are on the right end. My other
I've never got a good one.
Sorry, say again.
No, I just said I've never gotten a good one. I've never had a close split decision go my way once. So
yeah, even to your point about laying juice on a female fighter in a fight that is expected to go to decision, at least
and
this
one of
fight,
British. Yeah.
No, it's not even that though. At least this fight is going to be clear. It's tough to envision an outcome where this is like a split, right? Because they're doing completely different things. I mean, I suppose like Carolina could beat her up on the feet for 4 minutes, get taken down, and a judge is like, hey, I'm giving it to the British fighter. But by and large, I do not expect this to be a difficult fight to judge. I think the round should be scored pretty clearly one way or the other. We'll see, though. You could get 2.5 minutes of striking and then 2.5 minutes of grappling, and it does make it difficult. So I don't want to completely throw that into the universe. But this does, among all the fights that are lined minus 130, I think this is one of the ones that is less likely, I would say, to go to a split decision. I'm taking another shot, though, against the British fighter in my final bet as well. That's with Losang Keita at minus 230 against Nathaniel Wood at plus 200. Wood's a great fighter, but he's been in a number of fights where he gets hurt that have not finished. He's been knocked down in several of his fights. He's also knocked down several of his opponents without finishing them as well. He's extremely due to have one of his fights end inside the distance. Keita's an interesting case because he was supposed to fight Patricio Pitbull in his UFC debut, ended up coming in 5 pounds overweight. They ended up canceling that bout. He's the former Octagon FC champion over in Czech Republic. He's bigger than Nathaniel Wood. Wood's a former bantamweight, but he's an inch taller, has a 3-inch reach advantage. Not really sure how this weight cut is going to go since it didn't go well the first time, but if it does go okay, I think he's going to hurt Wood, and I think he's going to finish him. I make the line for Keita about minus 275. You can bet him at minus 230. There's certainly an edge there. And then I make his knockout prop about plus 170 and his inside the distance line about plus 140. I don't think there's necessarily edges or big edges on those numbers. I think I'm pretty closely aligned with the market on the finish props, but I do like him as a bet this weekend up to about minus 250 on the money line. We'll see if I end up parlaying that with something or pairing it with something or just playing the finish props for Keita against Nathaniel Wood, a fighter, as I've said, who is more than due to have one of his fights end inside the distance. I don't think I project value on the under, though. Billy, Losang Keita against Nathaniel Wood. What did you think about Keita, the tape you've seen? What were your thoughts before that fight against Pitbull? Because I think I had him finishing Pitbull in that matchup before it get canceled. And then any bets or thoughts you have for this fight.
Yeah, I'm gonna ignore most of your questions and respond with a question to you. Do you know Losane Keita's nickname?
Black Panther.
And Curtis Campbell is
Pink Panther.
Panther Parlay, baby. We got to do the Panther Parlay. You just said you might parlay or pair him with something else. The Panther Parlay is right there. I was already on Curtis Campbell. You like Losane Keita. Fire it up. They're in. Oh, no, they're not back-to-back fights. Mason Jones and Axel Sola are unfortunately interrupting the Panthers. But, yeah, that's you can't not take that, right? I mean, it's right there for the taking. We like them both. Both solid favorites. Both have had a ton of line movement their way. We're riding with the markets, Panther Parlay. That's all I have to say about that.
They're both basically the same price as well at about minus 230. You pair those together, you get to plus 106 if you like the Panther parlay this week. And as I said, I do like Danny Silva a little bit. I was actually considering like a Silva plus 3.5 play. So I don't want to fully rain on your Panther parlay parade, but I would not blame anybody for taking that bet. It's just electric. How could you not like the Panther parlay? My high school mascot, also the Panthers. So
oh, come on, you got to take it.
I know
it's right there.
I know. When I was in elementary school, because it was a private school, I went there since I was like a young kid all the way through senior year. When I was young, their mascot was the Pink Panthers, and whoever took over the school was like, absolutely not. We're getting mercilessly made fun of on the field in every game we play. So they ended up changing it to just the Panthers, and they made the Panther like royal blue, which I don't think that's a Panther color either necessarily, but at least it wasn't the Pink Panthers. By the time I got to, you know what? I think I'm actually, now that I'm realizing it, from a legal perspective, they may have been potentially sued or had legal action taken against them. They were very much ripping off the Pink Panther. Yeah, the Pink Panther cartoon design. So it might have been a legal issue that caused them to change it. But all of that is to say, I don't think I can bet on Danny Silva or go against the Panther parlay this weekend. So you won't find a bet on Silva for me. You may find a bet on Losane Keita paired with somebody, but maybe not the Pink Panther. I'll see what I end up doing. The other couple fights that we did not get to, I think there's 2 or 3 fights we didn't get to on this card. One of them is a huge favorite, Mario Pinto against Felipe Franco. Franco is a short notice replacement for Mick Parkin. Franco 10-0, all of his finishes in round 1. Hasn't necessarily fought any real competition, though. He's 4 inches taller, has a 3-inch reach advantage. Any bets for you on the biggest favorite on the card, Billy?
No, again, these are where I feel like DFS is the better way to play it. There's a bunch of super expensive guys because there are all these huge favorites. There's 3 fighters like minus 600 or longer, all of which in fights that are minus 600 or longer to end inside the distance. That'd be Pinto, Mantis, Contradivisius, who we're going to talk about in a second.
Well, we talked about the pronunciations. You did your best.
Another rough name. And then also Evo, who we discussed earlier. You can get 2 of those 3 fairly easily with some of the cheap fighters we like. For DFS, which 2 is tricky. Mantis has the best first round odds, and at these price points, you kind of need a first round stoppage or a ton of takedowns. I don't think any of these guys are going to get Merab style or Mcdebek oral by. I know I'm saying that one right.
Oh yeah, you know that
style double-digit takedowns. I will say as an aside, I saw announcers in my fight career go up to a lot of fighters and do the whole like, how do you say your name dance? None of them ever asked me. It never came up once, which made me a little bit sad, but they all got it right just on site. So
we're gonna need to get the story of we're gonna need to get the story of how you got your psycho nickname at one point on the podcast. Not gonna ask it today.
For another one. Yeah,
we're gonna save it. We'll save it for a bigger podcast with a bigger audience to make sure that's properly told. Because I'm curious. I've never actually asked you. You did for some reason throw in Mirdabek Oralbai's name. I think just to flex on the audience and on me, and leave me to say Montas Contravicius against Antonio Tricoli this weekend. I think it's Contravicius. I would love if this guy got with Jasmine Jasudavicius and then she married him and hyphenated her last name to Jasudavicius Contravicius. That would just be elite for Bruce Buffer to have to pronounce before one of her fights. But Contravicius is 9 years younger. He's a very good kickboxer. Won on Contender Series as a slight underdog. Not really sure how to judge his level. I'm curious what your thoughts on him, how you bet him in that fight, what your thoughts on him are as a prospect. Not really sure if Tricoli is training. He seems more focused on his poker career than he does his fight career. You'll probably see him at the next World Series of Poker. So he may just be showing up here for a paycheck and for a buy-in for his next tournament. He is the bigger man, though, 3 inches taller, a 5-inch reach advantage. Billy, controversy is a minus 770 favorite. Any bets or thoughts for you on this fight aside from a quick controversious finish?
Yeah, I'm trying to see how I had that. I actually picked against him based on his what I saw at the time, not great grappling going into his Contender Series fight. But since then, he competed in a professional grappling match that he won. So that's a good sign. He's looking to expand his game and grow. And I don't know why Trocoli got another fight. He's 0-3 with 3 first-round finishes, or 3 finish losses. I don't know if they were all first round off the top of my head. And yeah, they're giving him another fight for some reason. I don't really know why, but it's probably to make Mantis look good. So, do with that information what you will. But I think the UFC is setting this up for a reason. And I also think Mantis, of the heavy favorites, is probably my favorite DFS option, although I will be mixing and matching the 3 of them, all with difficult to pronounce names.
Yeah, Tricoli also lost his Contender Series bout as well. Yeah. It was overturned to a no contest. I apologize. But, he failed the drug test, so he won. He won on Contender Series, failed for Nandro, and then has gotten 3 UFC fights. Lost to Share a Bullet in round 3. I think that fight was actually more competitive than you remember for the first couple of rounds. Choked out by Tresean Gore, who was standing guillotine in round 1, and then again by Movsar Abdulmalik, standing guillotine his last 2 losses. So very bad sign, an indicator that this dude, I don't want to insinuate anything, and this is purely speculation, but if I had to guess, a dude losing by round 1 submission twice in a row, who is a professional gambler on the outside, may have some influence as to how that result ended up. Standing guillotine is super suspicious. 2 in a row is a red flag. But we're going to move on from Tricoli down to the last fight on the card we did not cover. This is one of the best fights on the card. I'm curious if Billy has any takes on this. That's Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi against Shamrock. Al-Sawadi about minus 125, Shamrock plus 105. Rock is 32 years old. He very bad striking defense. I think Al-Sawadi has better striking defense, but a worse chin. So if these two end up brawling it out, I think they're both going to take a ton of damage. I could see either falling via strikes. As a result, I think the line being around a pick'em is right. My model does like Al-Sawadi, but if I was picking a side, it'd be Shamrock. And I think my approach here is to bet Shamrock live. I think he has the better cardio. He's going to be the guy pressuring. He's the bigger man, 3 inches taller, 4-inch reach advantage. And I think he's eventually going to wear on Al-Sawadi as we get deeper into the fight. So Shamrock live after round 1. My approach here might maybe even his round 2 or round 3 props could be a look as well. Billy, Shamrock, Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi. Any thoughts or bets for you on our 14th and final fight?
Yeah, I was tempted to do a full fight preview of this one, but Al-Sawadi has had 1 UFC fight. It was March of 2024, and outside of a grappling match in May of 2024, he hasn't competed in anything, and that makes it really hard to do like a technique and style breakdown because a lot could have changed in those 2 years. We don't really know what those injuries were, what's happening. So I am basically fading that one, but I do like your angle on it.
Before we get out of here,
before we go to your note, quick note from producer David Payne in the chat. His high school nickname was also the Panthers, so the Panther parlay is growing stronger. I'm guessing David already has a bet on the Panther parlay. If I was a betting man on his bets, we were the Cavaliers, and we attempted to use the Cleveland Cavaliers logo before also getting a cease and desist letter and having to change it to a generic one. So your story resonated with me.
It seems like a common occurrence for high schools in the time we're all in our mid to late 30s here, in the time that the internet came about, and it seems like colleges and other companies were able to do research and find out that other people were appropriating their logo. It seems like all of our schools potentially got sued or hit with the cease and desist to break up that IP. Before we get out of here, Billy, speaking of schools, speaking of nicknames and school mascots, NCAA tournament did begin today. And although the listeners for this episode, I'm sure, are here for our UFC picks, just want to make sure our official March Madness picks are on tape. That way, if we end up picking the winner, if we pick our Final Four correctly, we have it on tape. We could end up cutting it up and demanding that our social team put it on social media. So, Billy, No handicapper analysis required. Who do you have winning it all this year?
I've been informed that it is possible to have a Michigan State college basketball final. I'm going to take Michigan, who I've also been informed is a 1 seed, to win that over Michigan State. I was more of a U of M fan growing up than Michigan State, although I find it disingenuous for people in Michigan who went to neither school to say us and we about one of them and not the other. So yeah, I guess go blue, I guess, but all Michigan final is really what I'm rooting for.
Neutral observer, I feel like I've always been on the Michigan side of the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, but I'm actually more towards the Michigan State side of the Michigan State.
That's fair.
Michigan rivalry. I think it's just I think it's the nickname. I think it's the Spartans, like the colors. I think they just appeal to me a little bit more. Obviously, Michigan has the better football helmets, but I am picking Michigan to win the tournament as well. I have them beating Duke in the final. Purdue and Illinois were my other Final Four teams. So my Final Four usually adds up to 7 in terms of the seeds. I think that is the average over time of the seed rankings. They usually add up to 7 on average. So I usually pick 2 1s, a 2, and a 3 in my Final Four. And I have Michigan over Duke in a very chalky final, even though Duke was down at halftime today. Did end up rallying, and I think they're going to obviously play better the remainder of the tournament. But hopefully we get some underdogs to make March Madness interesting, and hopefully some underdogs start cashing in the octagon, because it has been a favorite heavy year. Favorites are absolutely crushing. If you bet every underdog blind, you would be down a ton of money. If you bet every favorite blind, I believe you would be profitable to this point in the year. So expecting some regression. But that'll do it for our UFC betting preview. You can find more UFC betting content both from Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com and in the Action Network app. And if you'd like to instantly tell some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, make sure to look for the quick slip links both in the podcast and video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/betnow. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to all expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. See you back here next week.